That is funny. Well, it is 9 o'clock. And so I would like to just say good morning to everyone. I am Shalonda Stokes. I'm the president of Downtown Partnership of Baltimore. And once again, I'm just pleased that you've joined us today for our Downtown Download webinar. As always, I have my co-host partner, Councilman Eric Costello, and you'll hear from him in a couple minutes. You know, we've been doing these webinars since the beginning of the pandemic as a way to connect our viewers with the latest news and information. And today, I mean, we have a really, really exciting panel. I'm gonna introduce them in a couple minutes. I just wanna give councilmen an opportunity to speak on that. And I also just wanna talk a little bit about what's been happening at Downtown Partnership. I wanna thank everybody who participated in Baltimore Summer Restaurant Week. You know, this is really a difficult time for our restaurants and their staff. So along with our partners, Visit Baltimore and others, we changed this year's Restaurant Week so that we made sure it was easy and inclusive for businesses and for everybody to participate. And so I hope that everyone did. And from everybody that I've spoken to already, it seems like business volumes were definitely higher. I know I made it a point to get around and try things that I didn't before. And so to all of the diners who supported our Restaurant Week, thank you, thank you, thank you. But I want to remind you that even though Restaurant Week is over, Downtown Partnership continues to help our restaurant community, and we have the curbside program, special outdoor parklets. If you have not had an opportunity to dine outside, this is where we've turned the parking spaces into dining patios on Charles Street. So please, the schedule is on our website to take a look at where you'll see the parklet. And I know you've heard a lot of information about what BDC is doing with Design for Distancing, so you'll really start to see the transformation of those spaces overall. And so really look forward to that. Councilman Costello, before I introduce our panelists, I'm gonna turn it over to you. I know you may have some updates and information as well.
Thanks so much, Shalonda, and thank you to our guests for being here today. I do have a few quick updates. First, as I'm sure everyone's aware, there was a pretty significant gas explosion in Northwest Baltimore, specifically in the Reisterstown Station neighborhood yesterday. One person has died, unfortunately. There were 7 serious injuries and a number of other people who were injured. Emergency management personnel have been there all throughout the evening and are continuing recovery operations this morning. The second thing, as many of you may have heard, Mayor Young issued a revised executive order on Friday that went into effect at 5 p.m. I've included a link here that includes the executive order as well as interpretive guidance. In short, outdoor gatherings have been capped at 25 people. Indoor event venues have been capped at 25 people or 25% occupancy, which is ever less. Religious facilities have been capped at 25% of occupancy. Same with retail establishments and malls, as well as indoor recreation establishments. Restaurants, the indoor area is capped at 25% of their occupancy. Indoor has to close at 10 p.m. Outdoor is not impacted by this, so whatever a restaurant is approved for may continue to operate at that and may continue to do delivery or carry out until 2 a.m. Next update is the Parking Authority. They're going to begin enforcement of residential permit parking starting on September 1st. If you need a permit or a decal, you can get one at the Parking Authority offices, which will be operating under limited hours and days. After that, the city is providing free COVID-19 testing if you feel that you are in need of that. There are a number of different days, dates, times, locations. The locations seem to change every day or every two, but all of those are included in this flyer right here. After that, some exciting news from Lexington Market. I'm going to provide a link. Please keep in mind this link is not going to be live until about an hour from now. But basically, Lexington Market is starting to accept applications for vendors who wish to operate in the new market through October 2nd. And then they expect to have a second round of vendor applications starting in January of 2021, with a deadline in March of 2021. And then the last update I have, there have been a number of issues with United States Postal Service delays, as I'm sure many of our listeners have recently read about or heard about. Obviously, the USPS is a federal agency. We would encourage folks to their respective Congress member, as well as our two U.S. Senators, Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen. Each of their offices are aware of the situation and are working actively on it. I can't say with any level of certainty how soon we can expect some results there, but I would encourage everyone who's experienced any USPS issues to reach out to their respective reps as well as our two senators. With that, I will turn it back over to you, Shalonda.
Thank you so much. I just want to give an overview, and Councilman Costello, one of the things that I just want to put a little note on, because I know you're getting calls like I'm getting calls. We had a very good call with the health commissioner, who will be our guest on next week's show, but had a really good call with her about the changes in indoor and outdoor dining. Indoor and outdoor for special events, and that maximum capacity being 25. It's a lot of questions with people saying, if my venue is large, extremely large, why can I only have 25 people? Really, as you start to look at Baltimore City and the spread, what they've recognized by contact tracing is that when you have these large groups, people get a little bit uninhibited sometimes, you get very social and friendly, and the spread is exponential. And so for Baltimore City right now, we're really calling on everybody to do your part, wear your masks, stay socially distant, wash hands often, all of those things, but really try to minimize the size of your group. So just wanted to put a pin on that. And it's a great transition to some of what we're talking about today. I think when some people think of the University of Maryland, they tend to think of College Park. I know here, and for probably the 6,700 students here, we think of University of Maryland, Baltimore, which has 6 nationally ranked professional schools: medicine, law, dentistry, pharmacy, nursing, and social work, and confers most of the professional practice doctoral degrees awarded in Maryland, which is great. UMB is an incredibly prestigious institution. In fact, it has deep roots to the community throughout Baltimore. And today, we'd like to explore those ties to Baltimore and the groundbreaking work they're doing on everything from social equity issues, which have been really come to the forefront, all the way to COVID research. And so if you saw the Baltimore Sun yesterday, you could not have missed the cover story that the School of Medicine right here in downtown Baltimore is one of 30 U.S. centers taking part in the nation's most advanced trial for a COVID-19 vaccine. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Just want to give you an overview of our panelists today. We have Dr. Jarrell, a skilled surgeon who performed kidney and liver transplants. He was recruited by the University of Maryland School of Medicine to chair its Department of Surgery before becoming the executive vice dean at the School of Medicine. He took over as interim president for UMB when our former board chair at Downtown Partnership, Dr. Jay Perman, left to become the chancellor of the entire university system of Maryland. So as interim, Dr. Jarrell has led UMB through the COVID crisis and all that it entails, including plans for the return of students to campus and all of that for the fall semester. We also have Bronwyn Mayden. She's on the faculty at UMB School for Social Work and the executive director of Promise Heights, which, if you don't know about it, you will find out. It's a unique partnership between the university, nonprofit agencies, faith-based organizations, and community groups, all working to improve the lives of children in one of Baltimore's most distressed communities. And our last but definitely not least guest today is Dr. Gia Grier McGinnis. She's the executive director of the UMB CURE Scholars Program, which is a groundbreaking National Institutes of Health funded pipeline program serving West Baltimore youth in grades 6 through 12. So thank you to our panelists and guests. Councilman, I'm going to turn it over to you. I do ask all of our attendees to please place your questions in the Q&A box. As always, with our format, Councilman Costello will talk to our panelists with some questions that we have already. And as we get your questions in, towards the end, we will come back and I'll ask those questions. So please, throughout the interview, please put your questions in the Q&A box that's located towards the bottom of your screen. Councilman, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Shalonda. Appreciate it. Dr. Jarrell, Dr. McGinnis, and Bronwyn, thank you so much for being here today with us. We really appreciate it as well. Dr. Jarrell, I want to start off with you. UMB is an incredibly important anchor institution here in downtown Baltimore and really in the whole of city of Baltimore. I work with your team regularly, and I know that you've been collaborating with Downtown Partnership for years to improve the areas around your campus. So let me begin first by thanking you and the institution that you lead for everything that you all do.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And running an institution as diverse as UMB has got to be a big task in the best of times. You took over UMB right around the time that COVID-19 struck. What has that experience been like? And is there anything in your medical background that you feel has better prepared you to tackle such a complex series of challenges?
Councilman Costello, I'll be glad to answer that. And let me thank Shalonda for a nice introduction. I appreciate it. And I would want to give you all the comment that whenever I'm with now Chancellor Perman, he always has pleasant memories of chairing the Downtown Partnership and says he misses you all a lot. Of course, he's not far away. He's actually a little closer, isn't he?
He is.
And the other thing I wanted to thank Councilman Costello on was the Lexington Market update, because that is really coming along, and talk about an important anchor to the UMB campus. The Lexington Market is a key thing, and we want to get our people and the community very involved in that market and back to coming there. So I look forward to that time. So I think to answer your question, I stepped into this position on January the 6th. January the 6th, things were quiet, and I actually was focusing on, well, what do I need to do? What are my priorities, et cetera. But you all know sort of how the COVID pandemic rolled out. I will tell you that on March 15th, we went on a fairly significant restricted activities on our campus. We went to telework completely for 5,000 people. We suspended in-person classes, so all of our classes went to didactic, and we turned on a dime. All of them went to online, so we turned on a dime to get them online, and we stopped many of our other clinical rotations for the moment. But of course, as you might guess, we continued two important things. We certainly continued clinical care. In fact, clinical care ramped up to address the issue. And the other thing we did was we kept certain pieces of our research very active. Research related to COVID, research related to people who were very seriously ill and needed certain kinds of experimental or research drugs and treatments. And so important pieces of UMB stayed very alive. And in the meanwhile, we instituted a number of steps to take the proper medical precautions. Masks, et cetera, are all mandatory really on our campus now. And we're still, by the way, teleworking. And those who are coming onto campus on a regular basis are also monitoring their signs and symptoms of COVID on a daily basis, and we get that input so that we can advise people who might be at risk for COVID and then get them tested. And lastly, for those who are going to be coming back in August, they'll all get a COVID test as part of the routine. I also paid attention to your comment about testing in Baltimore, and the medical center, along with UMB, have stood up that Baltimore Convention Center in concert with Johns Hopkins. It's been a terrific effort, and we've really worked on high throughput of citizens to go through that testing apparatus. And I spoke to one of our deans who went through it last week, and he said, I had an appointment, I walked in, 4 minutes later I walked out. The next day I got my result back. That's actually the ideal objective. That's what we're working toward, and UMB and the medical center have worked very hard to make that a reality, and we're doing that in other spots in the state. If you ask what I really stepped into, what I really stepped into was a situation where teamwork, leadership, and logistics became a critical part of our sustaining our employees and students at the university and making sure that we were acting in unison. And so I will tell you that every day for at least 1 to 2 hours, sometimes more, I meet with our team. We discuss every little detail about this policy or that practice, or do we need to consider this? And we put a plan in place, and then we communicate it. So for me, it's been an experience in what is good decision making and good communication about when you're dealing with 10 or 11,000 total people, and we've worked at that. We also have worked very hard to make sure that our teleworkers have the access that they need to telework, and I'm happy to say that when we converted to that along with our online teaching, it was a pretty smooth conversion. Actually, I think probably like everybody on this call, we're learning that there may be a more efficient way to do certain things. And so, again, I would have not thought a year ago that we would be saying such words, but yet now that I look at it, I'm thinking, there's a lot to learn here. The one other comment I would make is that I've had the great pleasure to work with Chancellor Perman and the other system universities because, of course, they're not medical universities, whereas we have 4 schools committed to health plus law and social work. So our expertise isn't just an issue of doing a vaccine trial. It's also working with all of the constituents in the system to give them advice and suggestions and a sounding board for how they're going to deal with this crisis as well. So that's been a good thing. And of course, we've done the same with the state relative to working very hard to make testing more freely available. I think the last comment I would make is that all of us on this phone call are thinking, or on this webinar, are thinking that COVID-19 is a medical disease, and it surely is, but it is a phenomenal social disruptor. And we've just seen that over and over and over again. And so paying attention to how it disrupts all of our support structures, all of the disadvantaged, all of those who don't have access to care, it's just a major force there. And so that's where social work and law really come to the fore. Not that medicine doesn't, it does, but those kinds of issues are going to be a residual around here the same as the medical aspects. And of course, on top of all of that, we did have the killing of George Floyd, and that is very front of mind for me and others, and how we address those kinds of issues going forward. So it's been a whirlwind to answer your question, what did I step into? And the answer is a whole lot of stuff, but it's been fun.
Thank you. That's a perfect segue into the next thing we wanted to chat about. So we know that UMB has a lot of brilliant minds advancing the fields of medicine, law, dentistry, pharmacy, nursing, and social work. But they're also working on things like improving internet service and food security options in some of Baltimore's more disadvantaged neighborhoods. We've all heard your predecessor, Dr. Perman, say that at UMB, community engagement is simply not optional. Talk about the university's broader commitment to our community and what that looks like. What kind of things are UMB working on to address these challenges?
Right. So thank you. So what I will briefly mention, because I know we have Dr. Grier McGinnis on the call, I will have her address the CURE program, because I think that's emblematic of what we've been doing in West Baltimore. So we'll have a chance. Shalonda, will she have her own chance, or do I need to give it to her?
She has her chance, but we're fluid with it as well. So if you'd like to transition, we can absolutely do that now.
Well, maybe if Gia would like to talk about CURE for a few minutes, because it's such a key part of the university. Gia, we're having our 5th anniversary. Talk about the CURE Scholars.
Yeah, so CURE Scholars is, again, a pipeline program for West Baltimore youth, grades 6 through eventually 12, recruited at 6th grade level. It's funded by the National Institute of Health, along with institutional and foundation supports. And so basically there are over 115 active scholars, all from West Baltimore. And particularly, we've been talking about COVID. We also kind of went into a whirlwind. I know Bronwyn with Promise Heights, we kind of hit the ground running in March as well. And right now we've been kind of keeping the scholars online to be safe. We just are in the process of wrapping our first virtual summer. We had over 60 scholars online this summer to keep them safe and not bring them to campus this year. We also did kind of food deployment. We have a social worker that kind of goes around and delivers food to the scholars and connects them with resources around the city. And so that's just some of the things we've been doing in COVID. I know, Eric, you have some other things you'll get me to talk about a little bit later. But I don't know if Bronwyn wants to talk about some COVID adjustments real quick before we move on.
Right, so sort of in parallel with the CURE Scholars, we have worked hard to make sure that they and other students in West Baltimore have access to computers, and in fact did a drive to get an additional 30 computers in our immediate neighboring school and other schools. We're working very much with the community in terms of broadband to get that available to our West Baltimore community in a much more accessible manner, and UMB will be an anchor on that along with others. We have continued to view our role as an anchor institution, meaning, I think what you said, Councilman, and that is that we're not next to this community, we are part of this community, and therefore we have to support the minority-owned businesses, the individuals in that area, the health of those individuals. I don't need to tell anyone on this call about the state of wellness and state of health in the West Baltimore community as a whole. It's at the bottom of the list relative to the state of Maryland, and that's a not tolerable situation, so we have to work to that, which raises a fascinating question, which I hope will be the case, that as we do vaccine trials, that our West Baltimore partners will be part of those trials as well. Because of course they will benefit directly under the presumption that those vaccines have a beneficial effect, and we certainly think. We have put, we have very strong purchasing goals in place, and I know we're close to $250,000, but it doesn't sound like nearly enough of getting services provided by our West Baltimore businesses. There's been a lot of other local development, streetscape improvements, et cetera. We have a really, I think, effective program, which I think directly benefits the West Baltimore community, and that is that we put in place an incentive for our UMB employees to actually buy homes in West Baltimore and live there. It's a live where you work program. And our numbers have been quite amazing on that, in that I have them right here. We have now 34 employees now in West Baltimore who have rehabbed homes in blighted communities. It's limited to a number of neighborhoods, and that has allowed them to be in what I consider to be a very nice home. And start their life or continue their life there, and even walk to work at UMB. So to me, that gets people on the street, it gets buy-in to the community, and we're very proud of that. We hope to get to up to 90 families in that program. So that'll be a major step forward. The last thing I would mention, not to get into too much of the detail, is we've got this wonderful thing happening, and I'm going to be there tomorrow. Our Community Engagement Center, right there on Poppleton near Baltimore Street, is now finished. And we expect a whole lot of, it's 20,000 square feet. It's a renovated building. We expect a whole lot of programming for our community members, and it'll replace the Community Engagement Center over in the sort of the base of that parking lot on Baltimore Street. And we expect health and fitness classes. We expect police athletic activities. We expect a lot of elementary and middle school children coming there for programming, and we expect the community to come for things that will help build their resume, help them find jobs, which is a major effort of the Engagement Center, and also give them their own exercises class. Shalonda said she did her exercise this morning, and they need to do their exercise as well. And so Zumba classes and things like that are a mainstay in that Community Engagement Center. So I think a whole lot of activities are going on, and we've just started that. So I'm so pleased that that's going to happen. It does have a Workforce Wednesday where people come in and learn how to get job training and then find jobs. So very pleased with all that. That's just touching the surface, Councilman. If there are specific things, I'd be glad to address them if I can.
Thank you. Yeah, we know how incredible and deep the impact is that UMB has, especially in West Baltimore, which will transition to the next question. And this is for Bronwyn. Bronwyn, you've heard me say frequently that the School of Social Work is probably the most important institutional partner that we have in Central West Baltimore, specifically in Upton and Druid Heights, which is in the 11th District, which I represent. The School of Social Work trains its students to change lives by helping people in a variety of difficult situations. And that's exactly the work that you're doing as Executive Director of Promise Heights. Can you tell us a little bit about the program and how you take academic concepts from the classroom and put them into practice in a neighborhood that is challenged?
Yes, thank you, Eric. And I also want to thank Dr. Jarrell for his leadership because it has been a very calm and steady hand, as well as keeping us all very informed in terms of what's going on and what we should be doing in terms of COVID-19. So, I really need to take this time to applaud his efforts. To respond to your question, we've been working for about 14 years in the neighborhood of Upton Druid Heights. It is less than a mile from the university. And when we first started working there, Eric, we were very concerned. Some of the things that Bruce just mentioned in terms of the health disparities we noticed, but not just the health disparities, the educational disparities that we saw in the community. So this was a community that was really the premier African-American community in the city of Baltimore. A lot of well-known African-Americans grew up there. Thurgood Marshall, one, Billie Holiday. I could go on and on, Cab Calloway, to give you a long list of people. And I think people know where the neighborhood is. But the last, I would say, 30 years, we really have suffered, so much so that in the 5 schools in that neighborhood, the children, only 5% of the children are proficient in reading and math. 1/3 of the children have asthma. And when we first started working, the infant mortality rate was about 3 times for African-American families, babies, as it was for white families in the city. I'm really proud to say by pulling together, we don't do this work by ourselves. We work with about 20 organizations, as well as with the 5 public schools in the neighborhood, to really work together to try to change the trajectory of children's lives. So just like Gia said, they are a pipeline program. We start at the beginning of life. Before the beginning of life, we try to find every woman who is pregnant. I mean, we go up to people, we're like, are you pregnant? I've made some mistakes. I will tell you, I don't do that anymore. But we try to find them and entice them for services. And we don't, I know Dr. Jarrell don't want to hear this. If you go over to the east side to Hopkins to get your care, that's fine. I don't have a dog in that fight. what I'm trying to do is to make sure you get prenatal care because we need a healthy baby. So we do a lot of services starting at the very beginning of life. And I'm really proud of that program. Dr. Jarrell, I have to say to you, I'm surprised you didn't mention it because it's usually one of the first things you mention. Our infant mortality rate in that neighborhood, because of all the work all of us have done together, all the schools, I'm really proud, and I want to say this from the rooftop, that it is the same as Roland Park now. That is astounding considering that neighborhood. And so I think that it shows you the power of a university that can work with families and community and not be seen as an institution that just comes in and wants to use people for different trials or whatever, but will work with a group, an organization with other organizations to say, this problem is too big for even a university such as ours to lift all these boats, to lift these families, that we know that we have to work with the schools, with the religious institutions, with everyone that we can. And we don't try to come in and say to a group like Head Start that are big partners with us, oh, we can do it better. I say, let me help raise money for you, Head Start, so you can reach more children. But I also say to them, you know, I don't think professional development, you need to work on that. Let me work with you. We're social workers. We know how to do therapy. That's one of the things. We're clinical people, clinical social workers. And I think that, you know, you really have to look at, you know, the skills that we bring in terms of organizing. Please, let's not forget that Barbara Mikulski is a graduate of the School of Social Work. And look at where it led her, folks. Led her to the U.S. Senate, leading a good fight, you know. So she learned organizing, she learned advocacy, she learned about policy making, and these are all the things that we teach in the School of Social Work, along with the School of Law, but we feel that that is part of our forte, and we teach the doctors that. We say to them, we need your help. We need your clinical skills to help us advocate for children and families, and that's why I think we're such a strong institution, and I'm proud to call it my professional home. So I hope I answered your question. I can go on and on. We have such wonderful stories, Gia, of the kids we're working with, and the families and the changes that we really have seen.
That was great, Bronwyn. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I want to transition over to Dr. McGinnis and the CURE program. So the CURE program trains 6th through 12th grade students for careers in STEM. I'm curious how you identify kids to participate in the program and whether or not the kids need to have a particular skill set coming in.
A great question. So we recruit at 6th grade level from 3 partner schools in West Baltimore. So Southwest Baltimore Charter School, Franklin Square Elementary Middle School, and Green Street Academy. And those 3 schools in particular, because when CURE first launched, they didn't open call to schools in West Baltimore with the intent of only working with one school, but all 3 schools stepped forward and they didn't want to turn anyone away. We do require a science teacher recommendation, which is just to get a sense of their interest in the program. So if you hate science, you probably won't like this program. But it's also important to note that we don't have a GPA requirement. We like to accept scholars wherever they are in their academic journey, and we intend to work with them throughout the time in the program to build skills and cultivate talent. The last point I'll make about kind of admissions is we're also looking to enter into partnerships with family. So the families that are interested in this program understand that this is a long-term investment in their child's future. This is not an after-school program that you do just for a year and put down. This is a very long-term commitment of several years with the goal of building our next generation of healthcare and STEM leaders. So we really love our CURE families. I think it's a myth that Baltimore City school parents don't care about their kids, but our parents definitely do.
Thank you. And I know there was a documentary aired this past year on Maryland Public Television, which focused on 5 of your successful CURE students, called 9th Grade from West Baltimore. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the success stories that you've had with the CURE program?
Absolutely. I actually have a quick update about one of those documentary scholars. One of the scholars is Princeton Saunders. She's currently at Western Senior High School, and she just got accepted to the Elijah Cummings Leadership Development Program in Israel. So pandemic willing, she'll be going to Israel next summer. It's like a 2-year program where she'll be trained in leadership development and work with a cohort of other youth. And part of what we do at CURE when we want our scholars to apply for these competitive programs is we help them with their application, we help them with their essays, we'll do like mock interviews with them because we want them to be successful and competitive in these programs. Another quick success story is one with our faculty member from School of Nursing, Dr. Ann Flower, and her mentee, Zaira. They were paired together when Zaire was a 7th grader at Franklin Square. And there was one summer where Zaire had a very tough summer, both academically, and she was also having some challenges interpersonally in the program and was going to drop from the program. But Dr. Ann and our social worker at the time took her to the School of Nursing simulation lab, where they took them around, and Zaire got to learn about instrumentation and about the field of nursing. And at the same time, our social worker was able to pull her off to the side and talk with her about some of those challenges. But fast forward, Zaire is now at Dunbar P-Tech, which is one of our partner high schools. And she just told Dr. Ann this summer that she's entering the nursing track. So this is really kind of how CURE works, giving our scholars successful role models and then kind of letting them kind of make the decision about their own journey, but supporting them socially along the way.
But could I add something to that? And that is, so we now have, we will have close to 140 students in that, and the lead class is entering the 11th grade. And I think all of us have our eyes set on the target of those young men and women now getting admitted, going to college, helping raise scholarships for them to go to college. And then to make sure that they have the support they need in college. So I think there's a handoff coming here to the college, for one, and second of all, there will be a mark of excellence that I hope we will put a checkbox next to, that our children are going to college. I think in the end, that's the success of the program, that we get them on a path to a career, whether it's healthcare or otherwise, that actually then gives them pride and hope, and they become an important part of the community as well. So that's sort of the end game here, I think.
That's great. And Bronwyn, can you tell us about a couple of your many success stories with families in Central West Baltimore? Is there anything that's a good example that jumps out at you?
Well, I think you're right. We do have a lot of success stories with the families, as well as, the teachers who have, quite honestly, have sometimes want to give up, as well as, just people in the neighborhood. But there is still a lot of work to do. I think about a young woman that we met by the name of Sheila, who came in, she was pregnant, but she was also severely depressed, anxious, and she had had no prenatal care. And part of it was because of the violence in her own household. She was basically abused, and we helped her in terms of not just making an escape plan, as we call it, but also helping her to find housing, which is, Eric, I think that's a real big issue in our neighborhood: affordable housing, good housing, that type of thing. And I'm really pleased to say that she went on to have a baby full term, that she is now someone who works with us on a regular basis. We see ourselves also as a pipeline, people who have given up, families who have given up. We can't give up. Some programs say, oh, I'm only going to work with the kids or whatever. The thing like Gia does, as well as what we do, is that you got to work with everybody, because the children are part of the unit. And so consequently, we work with families to make sure that families are housed, that are fed, and that they have the technology that you need. Both of you, Bruce, as well as you, Eric, touched upon some of the work we're doing in West Baltimore. We got a large $30 million grant from the U.S. Department of Education to fund the work that we're doing. We're the only school in social work in the country that got this grant, and a lot of them actually competed. And what we had to use money on very early on was to buy technology for the 5 schools. So we've bought almost 1,000 computers, whiteboards, everything that you need in terms of 21st century technology. Then, working with our recovery committee for the university, we knew that there was a digital divide. So I'm not sure I'm supposed to reveal this, Bruce, but we are really working. I'm going to kind of tiptoe around it. We are really working. We're working hard to make sure that these households are on internet, and that it's a fast speed internet, because it's great that we have these places where you can go to a parking lot. A parking lot is nice if you have a car. In the community that you serve, Eric, 2/3 of the people in our neighborhood, they don't have cars. And then the other thing, in that neighborhood, would you want to be sitting on a school parking lot at 9 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock with a computer? I don't think so. Where people are wondering, who are you and what are you doing? So it's important for us to work with our neighbors to get that technology. And I'm going to leave that alone, Bruce. That's what you're going to, later on. So I just want you to know we are really working on that quickly, trying to get it in place by the time kids go back to school the 8th. The other thing I want to mention, and I got to say this since, I have the floor, vaccines, not just COVID, which we're doing a great job on, but children are way behind on their immunizations. And we're working with the city health department because right now they only have a clinic in East Baltimore. We're working with them and negotiating, have a clinic on our campus so that kids from West Baltimore, their families can get there and they can get those shots. If they don't get those shots by the 30th of September, they're out of school, no matter if it's virtual. That's law. So we're working really hard with the city schools to get those kids in, and the health department, as well as our own campus. So, that's a long way of trying to answer your question. And then finally, I want to say the university has not talked a lot about the feeding program that they've been doing for the community at large. I have to tell you that we call it a freedom meal train. We do that once a week. We have served 3,200 folks in our neighborhood. And if you look at the raw numbers, we've served 1/3 of the citizens, the residents of that one neighborhood. So again, it's the generosity of people that work at the university that help us fund these programs, as well as others that just help us, like the president, when he goes out and he talks about it, and then it brings people to know about our programming. So that's, it's a long way of saying it's a lot of work, but we're all in this together.
If I may, let me add one thing to what, of course, Bronwyn always tells all. She's very good at that, and I appreciate it. We're hoping that vaccination clinic can be in the Community Engagement Center. I would hope that that's the case. I think in terms of the digital divide, the thing to really be aware of is, guess what? Education changed. It changed on March the 14th when we changed over. It changed for everybody in Baltimore and a lot of people in the US. And it's not going to go away. First of all, COVID isn't going away tomorrow. I don't know when it's going to go away. And I don't know when the vaccination is going to come. And I don't know when people are going to get it, the vaccination. And so those computers and that internet is going to be a lifeline. Bronwyn mentioned something that has a name, and it's called the summer slide. And that is how much time and knowledge the students lose during the summer. And the more minority, the more disadvantaged you are, the more you slide. And so it is critically important that these young men and women get access digitally, get computers, so that they not only have a summer slide, but there's going to be a winter slide here. I mean, there's going to be a whole year slide if we're not careful, and we just can't afford to let that happen.
Thank you. Shalonda, I don't know what it is with this set of panelists, but they seem to provide this perfect transition for me, and must be mind readers and know what I'm going to ask next. Bronwyn, you mentioned vaccines. Dr. Jarrell, you mentioned at the beginning the work that UMB is doing with respect to working on a vaccine for COVID-19. Can you tell us a little bit more about that research, who you're working with, what we should know about, what you're most excited about in that process?
Great, be happy to do that. Let me begin by saying that for years, UMB has had great depth in vaccine development and infectious diseases. And it has two major centers that have to do with infectious disease and vaccine development. One of them is the Center for Vaccine Development, CVD it's called, headed by Mike Levine originally and now by Dr. Kathy Newsel, a very internationally known program. And what many of you won't know is that the initial Ebola trials for the vaccine for Ebola was done in Baltimore by our Center for Vaccine Development. And quite a few new vaccines have been developed, tested, and then marketed through our Center for Vaccine Development in the School of Medicine. The other is the Institute for Human Virology. And of course, diseases like AIDS, et cetera, seem to evaporate when we're talking about COVID in the discussion, but the reality is they haven't evaporated at all. And so we also have a major effort led by Dr. Bob Gallo to develop a vaccine to protect people against AIDS. And again, there are some trials for the future there. But the Center for Vaccine Development has really been very focused on being involved in trials for vaccine. The other thing that they have had an association with is that we actually have a basic science laboratory that was very devoted to the coronaviruses. So you may remember SARS and MERS back, a decade ago. Well, we had a very sophisticated laboratory effort in that area. It's research that has to be done under very close supervision because these are significantly risky viruses. And so we had a lot of experience understanding. And so one interesting good piece of news is almost overnight, the new projects coming into that coronavirus lab have been phenomenal. And we've had $3 or $4 million worth of new ideas be funded to do research on. So there's a lot of basic research looking at this virus. Then there are two other main things going on largely in the clinical environment. One was to test a drug that some of you may have heard of called Remdesivir. This was a drug that was an antiviral. It was designed for another virus, but pulled out of the drawer for COVID, and we participated in those trials. That was a drug that showed a mortality drop from 11% to 8% in critically ill people. That's a very significant drop. That drug is becoming more available, but is still only available for special circumstances. But as that gets rolled out, that's an important thing for people to know about, because that says that there's rescue therapy, that if someone is really sick, there are now 1 or 2 drugs that appear to allow us to rescue people who are critically ill. We then have been very involved in 2 other vaccine trials. The first one is ongoing now. It's what's called a phase 1 trial, which means it's early. It's an early vaccine. It's a vaccine where there's 4 different active components and 1 inactive arm to the trial. And we are accruing patients, subjects in that particular arena, and hope to begin to have results certainly in a couple of months. as that's released. The second one is the one that's gotten much more attention, the Moderna trial. And we expect that to be starting momentarily. It's a phase 3 trial, which means that there is some phase 1 and 2 data to suggest that it has benefit. So that will be a fast track vaccine. I haven't seen the most recent count, but there are many other vaccines out there floating around, some in fairly advanced trials. I think there's a lot of hope that one of those trials will result in good outcomes, which then means by 2021, we'll be thinking about vaccinating people. That'll be an exciting time. I think that's really on the horizon at this point in time. So that's what we're doing right now.
That's great. I know we have a couple questions from our audience. I'm going to transition over to Shalonda.
Okay, so before we get to it, Dr. Jarrell, if I could just stay with you, coming outside of the vaccine piece initially, part of what we've recognized in our panelists are saying, we know that when a communicable disease outbreak begins, the ideal response for public health officials is to begin testing it early. We've been working with a number of people who are getting tested, and part of what we're encouraging is to make sure that people have credible testing. I know you guys, and you mentioned it earlier, are doing some things to help stand up some testing sites. Can you, for our audience, elaborate, let them know sort of where they can get tested and do those things, because that's one of the ways we're really going to be able to help, slow the growth of it.
Right, so I'll try to address that, but please cue me to add other things. So
Okay.
Testing for the COVID virus started out slow in this country, even though other countries seem to have their routines together to do the testing. In Maryland, the capability was restricted. The governor was very supportive of UMB to help us set up a lab, and we have been feverishly working on this. That lab uses a fairly sophisticated test. It's called a PCR test, and it's highly accurate with probably a 98% accuracy when you look at the test overall. It's the gold standard. It originally started, as you know, with a swab in the back of your nose. It's now able to be done both back and front, and there are other ways to do the swab easier. I haven't seen the total capacity for the state, but it's in the many thousands a day. I'm happy that UMB is contributing to that, but we still have a long way to really get to the number of tests a day that we need to be at. And the reason for that is that, as you know, the incubation period for this particular virus is up to 14 days. And so if you're going to do surveillance on a large scale, surveillance meaning people in the general public who are not sick but who might harbor the virus, you're talking about a lot of tests. So I would simply say that although testing is really important right now, of course, as you all know, the vaccine as well as preventive measures to prevent from getting the virus, that's really where the action will ultimately rest. But for now, it is about testing.
Right. No, and I agree. Thank you so much. It's not either or. I think everything that's happening now is an and.
Yes, I think that's right.
It's working
Yeah.
together. So thank you for that. Our next question comes from May, and I'm going to shout her out just because I think she's been on almost every Downtown Download segment. So thank you for that. Her question is, with so many corporations making statements of the importance of Black Lives Matter, do the panelists have strong partnerships with area corporations, or have the panelists seen an increase in corporate support for Promise Heights, CURE, and other programs?
So I wouldn't say we've seen a recent increase in corporate support. We have had some strong corporate partnerships in the past. For example, Becton Dixon did a fundraiser for CURE Their African American Affinity Group did that for us in February. We're also about to launch a program called Career Navigators, which is a special mentorship program that will be designed to target career-based mentorship, and we're hoping to make more connections with corporate entities through that program.
We have seen a couple of things. You know, Whiting Turner always helps us. We do a lot also physical things. When we first started working in the neighborhood a number of years ago, and that's, you know, when I first met Eric, I took him aside and said, have you noticed that there are no playgrounds in this neighborhood? And Whiting Turner has stepped in, and we've built 3 playgrounds, and they have helped us do that. Along with Future Care, I must admit, which is a large employer in Sandtown, Winchester. But we haven't seen an increase. I got to give a plug. If people are interested, Gia and I are always willing. You just heard about her Career Navigators. We're interested in that too. Or there are other things that people can do during COVID, and it's not like just send us checks of money. I mean, we will take that. But our Be More for Healthy Babies program, we're always struggling to buy diapers for people. Do you know you can't buy diapers on food stamps? Do you know how expensive they are? So if a organization wants to have a diaper drive or something to help us get diapers, that would be great. And we'll come help set it up. We'll come speaker. We'll do all that kind of stuff. You know, if they want to also collect books for young children, new books, we have a partnership with McCullough Homes. We go in there with Pratt Library. Even during COVID, we knock on the door, let them know it's outside the door. And we did some things for this summer in terms of reading and books and that type of thing. You know, the last thing I'll shout out is that we just got office space in the neighborhood. I'm not an interior designer. If someone wants to work with us and say, you know, this color would look great, do that. That would be wonderful. If they want to play HGTV with us, hey, we're ready for it. You know, help me out. You know, we have a little money to buy the furniture, but where is it supposed to go? You know, we want to make it pleasant for the community. So I think there are a whole lot of ways that you can help us without, let's say, just writing a check. But then again, I'll answer, we are open to anyone that wants to provide funding to help us do our work, because it is hard to do all the work as well as to fundraise. And we would love to have, I think, a stronger partnership with Downtown Partnership in terms of even kids when we get through COVID, or like we're hearing that we may never, but maybe just doing tours so kids can see maybe what they could become, and could visualize themselves maybe being a chef or cooking or whatever it is. So that's my plea for the people listening to that, if they're interested, to just think about ways that maybe they could help us out. We would really love the help.
Shalonda, there's been a huge amount of corporate interest in supporting not only basic research, but also what I'm going to call as translational or applied research, new ways to detect a virus, new apps on your phone to help you navigate the system, things that are more protective, and making masks and making swabs. It's been huge, and there's been a giant partnership with UMB and UMCP to have student competitions and faculty competitions, because there is funding out there. That helps the community indirectly. It doesn't directly address your question.
No, but I think it all counts. It adds up in the lesson that I'm hearing, and I hear the challenge and charge, Bronwyn. Dr. Jarrell beat you to the punch, though. We had a call. He's like, we need to make these connections happen. But it's going to take all of us. It is. This is truly a partnership. We don't know the end of COVID and where it's going, but we do know that together we're stronger. And what you're seeing is a number of partners stand up, and you're seeing silos that used to be silos, those walls breaking down, and that's figuring out how to cross those boundaries and work together. Councilman, I know we have 1 minute. I'm gonna give you 1 minute to say something, and then I'd like to make sure we thank our panelists and wrap.
Thank you, Shalonda. I just want to thank our panelists again, and just know how appreciative we are to have an anchor institution like UMB in downtown. So thank you all for the great work you do every day. Back to you, Shalonda.
Okay, and I just want to thank you again, and thank you not only for, I think what you've done is you've gone beyond just checking the boxes. It's not, what you can tell is that your work is intentional. You're looking for the outcomes, and that's what matters. And that's a part of what we're about. I ask that everybody tune in. The webinar will be available within 24 hours on our website, godowntownbaltimore.com. So please continue to look at that. We know that we have some exciting panelists coming up. Up next week, we have Dr. DeRaza, the Health Commissioner for the City of Baltimore, followed by the following week, we have Dick Cass with the Ravens. So we have some great things in store. Thank you. I want to thank my team, Mike and Nicole. You did an amazing job as always. Councilman Costello, I can't say enough about you. And I know we have on the line, Dr. Jarrell, you know this man, our board chair, Mark Wasserman. And so I just want to thank him also for his leadership throughout. So to all, we will see you next week. Thank you and take care.